Hello there, and welcome to Science with Sleepy. I'm glad you are here, ready to rest, ready to let your mind wander a little while your body settles down. Maybe you had a long day at school, or a busy day at work, or a day that just felt a little too loud. Right now, you do not have to solve anything or fix anything. You can just listen, get curious, and gently drift towards sleep. Tonight, we're going to walk very slowly into a strange question. What if time travel changed how we remember history? Not just a single event, like a battle or a discovery, but the way the whole story of the past feels in our minds. Close your eyes if you like, and imagine that history, instead of being a finished book, is more like a soft blanket that can be tugged, folded, and stitched again. When people talk about time travel, they often imagine silver machines, glowing doors, and flashing clocks. Scientists who study the universe talk more about space-time, gravity, and how time can stretch and bend near very heavy things. Historians, the people who study the past, talk about something else. They talk about records, memories, objects, stories, and how we know what really happened. Tonight, we will stand quietly between those two worlds, one where time can bend and one where memories can change. You can picture yourself in a calm, quiet library at night. The lights are warm and soft. Outside, the sky is dark and the city is almost silent. Around you, shelves reach up like tall trees, filled with books that hold the entire story of the world. Every shelf is a century. Every book is a year. Every page is a day. On these pages, historians, archaeologists, and many other experts have written what they believe is true about the past. Now imagine that somewhere in this library, there is a small hidden door. It looks like part of the wall, but if you know where to press, it opens with a gentle click. Behind it is not another shelf, but a hallway made of soft silver light. The hallway does not go left or right. It goes into time, forward and backward, through years, through centuries, through moments that have already passed. If you walk down that hallway, you could step out into any part of history you choose. Take a slow breath in and a slow breath out. You are not really going anywhere. You are safe in your bed, but in your mind, you can take a quiet walk through this hallway and ask a big question. If someone used this secret door and changed something small in the past, what would happen to all the shelves in the library? Would the books change? Would the pages ripple? Would the memories in our minds shift without us even noticing? Before we play with that idea, it helps to remember how people actually learn about the past. Historians do not have time machines. Instead, they have clues. Archaeologists dig into the ground and find broken pots, old tools, bones, and buildings. They read layers of soil like pages in a buried book. Paleoclimatologists study ice cores and tree rings to learn what the climate was like long ago. Linguists study ancient writing and languages. All of these clues help build a picture of what really happened. Imagine a group of archaeologists in a quiet desert, carefully brushing sand from a set of old stone steps. They find a doorway. Inside, there are painted walls, pottery, and scripts in a language that no one has spoken for thousands of years. Very slowly, over months and years, they study every shape and symbol. They test the age of the paint, the kind of clay in the pots, the pattern of stars shown on the ceiling. Bit by bit, they find out when these people lived, what they ate, what they believed, and how they understood the sky. Now imagine what would happen if a time traveler visited that place long ago. Maybe they dropped a small metal coin made from an element that did not exist in that time. Maybe they left a shoe print with a modern pattern. Maybe they used a flashlight that left a strange trace of plastic behind. If archaeologists later found that coin or that plastic, they would be puzzled. It would not fit the pattern. It would be a piece of evidence from the wrong century. In real life, this is part of how scientists test their ideas. If a clue does not match the others, it stands out. Many fields use this kind of checking. For example, geologists studying rock layers and astronomers studying light from distant stars all look for patterns and also for things that do not fit the pattern. When something does not fit, it might be a mistake, or it might be a sign that something important has been missed. If time travel were real and people kept leaving little traces in the past, then our records would slowly fill with more and more impossible objects. Strange alloys in ancient tools, modern pollen grains in very old soil layers, bits of plastic in ice that formed before humans invented plastic. Historians and scientists would notice. They might not know that it was time travel, but they would know that history, as written, had something odd inside it. So one way time travel could change how we remember history is by changing the evidence. Not huge events at first, but tiny fingerprints. Our picture of the past would shift in small ways. A battle would seem to have happened in slightly different weather. A city might look like it had one extra trade good that did not fit. A king might be buried with an object from the wrong culture. The more careful our tools became, the more these odd clues would show up. Take another slow breath in and out. Let your shoulders relax. Let your jaw loosen. You can imagine those scientists meeting in quiet rooms, spread across the world, looking at their data, their graphs, their maps. Some study ancient DNA from bones, trying to trace how people moved between continents. Others study layers of volcanic ash to connect timelines. When they all share their findings, they expect the pieces to fit into a single picture. But with time travelers leaving crumbs, the picture would have tiny cracks. Over the last decades, scientists have actually had a similar experience, but for a different reason. As tools got better, they found details that did not match old stories. For example, ancient DNA studies sometimes revealed that populations mixed much more than people thought. Archaeologists discovered, from isotope studies in teeth and bones, that some people in old graves grew up far from where they were buried. This changed stories about how people migrated, traded, and lived. In one study, researchers tested bones from a Roman cemetery in England. They found that many people buried there had actually grown up in North Africa or the Middle East. Their teeth held tiny traces of water and food from those distant places. Many history books said that Roman Britain was mostly local people, with a few soldiers from Italy. The new evidence showed a much more mixed world, full of travelers and traders who settled far from home. Another team studied skeletons from Viking graves in Scandinavia. They found that some of these warriors were not from the north at all. Their DNA matched people from places like Ireland, Scotland, and even parts of Asia. This changed how historians think about those voyages. It was not just one group raiding and settling. It was many groups mixing, trading, and moving together. These discoveries happen because science keeps getting better at reading tiny clues. A single tooth can now tell researchers where someone lived as a child, what they ate, and sometimes even what diseases they had. A small piece of bone can reveal family connections across thousands of miles. Each new tool adds another layer to the story. So even without time travel, our picture of the past is not fixed. It changes as we get better at reading evidence. In a way, we already are time travelers of a different kind. We move forward in time, but we send our tools and questions backward, into layers of rock, into faded letters, into tiny bits of carbon inside charred wood. Each new method, each new telescope or microscope gives us another way to look at the same old moments. If real time travel existed, and if people kept visiting the past, historians might begin to see patterns they could not explain any other way. They might see technology appear slightly earlier than it should. They might see stories that looked like legends, but matched events too perfectly. They might even see the same strange symbol or design showing up in different eras, as if someone kept leaving a calling card across time. Now let us imagine a different kind of trip. This time, you are the traveler. You step through the silver hallway behind the library wall. At first, your feet feel light, as if gravity is a little softer here. The air smells like pages and rain. Down the hall, doors float on either side like quiet islands. Each door leads to a different year. You walk up to one that glows softly with a date from hundreds of years ago and place your hand on the knob. You step out into a crowded old city square. The ground is made of worn stone. Carts roll past, pulled by animals. People speak in an older language. The air is full of smoke from fires and the sound of metal tools. You do not change anything big. You do not stop a war or save a famous person. You just sit on a step and watch. You listen to a baker argue with a customer. You watch children play with a simple toy. You see how people carry water, how they laugh, how often they look at the sky. You stay for a short while, then step back through the door, back into the hallway, and then back into the quiet library. You have not changed the past in any direct way, but something inside you has changed. When you later read the history book about that time, it will feel different. The book might still say, "This king ruled from this year to that year. This war happened here. This law was passed there." But now you will remember the way the street smelled, the tone in the baker's voice, the way the children shared their toy. This is another way time travel could change how we remember history. Not by changing the facts on the page, but by deepening the feelings behind them. In real life, historians already try to do something like this. They read letters, diaries, and court records. They study clothing, food, and tools. They look at tiny details to understand what daily life felt like. So history is not just names and dates, but living moments. Social historians and cultural historians, for example, focus on ordinary people and how they lived. They ask questions like, what did children learn in school? What songs did people sing? How did they care for the sick? When new sources appear, like a hidden diary found in an attic, or a forgotten box of photos in a museum, these historians can rewrite entire chapters of how we see a time period. The big events might stay the same, but the meaning of those events can change. In one recent discovery, historians found a diary written by a young woman who lived in London during the 1600s. She was not famous. She was not rich. She was just an ordinary person trying to make a living. But her diary described daily life in ways that no official records captured. She wrote about the smell of the streets, the sound of church bells, the way neighbors helped each other during hard times, and the small joys of finding a good piece of fruit at the market. Before this diary was found, historians knew about the big events of that time. They knew about kings and wars and laws, but they did not know as much about how ordinary people experienced those events. The diary filled in those gaps, making the past feel more real, more human. Another team of researchers studied letters written by soldiers during a war. The official records talked about battles and strategies, but the letters talked about missing home, about the food they ate, about the friends they made, about the fear and the boredom. These personal writings changed how historians understood what that war felt like for the people who lived through it. If time travelers could record these everyday moments, if they could capture the sounds and smells and feelings that written words cannot fully describe, our understanding of the past would deepen in ways we can barely imagine. History would not just be facts and dates. It would be a living, breathing experience that we could almost step into. Imagine that. With time travel, historians not only had letters, but could also record quiet sounds and smells. They might listen to the buzz of a medieval marketplace or the calm of a small farm at dawn. They might record the way people laughed in different centuries. When they came back, their books would carry that feeling. The words would be the same length, but between each line, there would be an invisible layer of extra life. Take another slow breath in and out. Let your hands rest softly. If they feel like sinking deeper into the bed, that is fine. You might already feel a little further away from the busy parts of the day. Your mind can float around these ideas without needing to hold on tightly. Now we can listen to a different possibility. What if time travel did not just change small details or add rich memories, but changed the big story? People often talk about paradoxes when they imagine this. One famous idea is the grandfather paradox. If you went back in time and changed something so that your grandparents never met, how could you be born to travel back in time in the first place? It's a logical knot that pulls on itself. Many scientists who think about time and space offer different possible answers. One idea is that time might be fixed in one long line, and no matter what you try to do in the past, you end up causing the events you thought you were changing. Another idea is that any change you make splits off a new branch of reality, a new timeline that grows beside the old one. A third idea is that some kinds of travel are simply impossible. For example, relativity tells us that moving very close to the speed of light can slow your own time, but does not let you go back. We do not know which of these, if any, is true, but we can imagine how each one would change the way history feels in our minds. If the past is fixed and cannot be changed, even by time travelers, then history would still be one story. Time travelers might visit, but whatever they do was always part of what happened. In that case, the library shelves do not really change. We just find out that some scenes we thought were ordinary once had a quiet visitor standing in the corner. On the other hand, if the past can split into different branches, then history would not just be one story. It would be more like a tree. Each time someone changed something, a new branch would grow. In that case, the library would expand in a strange way. A single year might have several different books, each one from a slightly different version of the world. A small choice would not only change the future, but also the number of futures that exist. You can imagine standing in front of the shelf for the year 1492, when European sailors first crossed the Atlantic and reached the Americas. In one version of the book, things happened exactly as you learned in school. In another, a time traveler warned the native peoples early about what was coming, so they made different choices and changed the outcome. In another, the voyage failed, and Europe discovered another route much later. All these versions are possible branches in a branching time travel story. If people in our world somehow gained access to these other branches, if they could peek at them the way we peek at alternate endings in a story, our sense of history would shift. Instead of saying, "This is what happened," we might say, "This is what happened in our branch, but there were many things that almost happened too." Historians already talk this way sometimes. They use the phrase counterfactual history to describe what-if questions about the past. What if a certain war had never started? What if a scientist had shared a discovery earlier? What if a leader had made a different choice? Researchers do not treat these what-ifs as real events, but they use them to understand how sensitive history is to small changes. Some studies, for example, look at how a single invention, like the printing press, changed the way ideas moved. Other studies look at how epidemics, like the Black Death, changed social structures in Europe. When historians play with what-if questions on paper, they see which parts of history were almost unavoidable and which parts were fragile. Take the Black Death, a terrible sickness that swept through Europe in the 1300s. Historians estimate that it killed between 1/3 and 1/2 of all people in some regions. After it passed, the world felt different. Fewer workers meant that those who survived could demand better pay. Some old rules about who could do what job started to break down. The way people fought about life and death shifted. Now imagine a time traveler going back to the year before the sickness arrived. They could not stop it completely. But what if they shared knowledge about how diseases spread? What if they showed people how to make simple masks or how to keep cleaner water? The sickness might still come, but maybe fewer people would die. Maybe the world after would look a little different. Historians who study this period have found that the Black Death did not hit everywhere the same way. Some cities lost almost everyone. Others lost far fewer people. The reasons are complex. Geography mattered. Trade routes mattered. The choices leaders made mattered. If a time traveler changed even one of those small factors, the whole pattern might shift. But here is the tricky part. If the sickness killed fewer people, would the changes that came after still happen? Would workers still gain more power? Would old rules still break? Some historians think yes, because other forces were already pushing in that direction. Others think no, because the shock of so much death was what made people willing to change. We cannot test this, but asking the question helps us see how connected everything is. Now imagine that time travelers could show us not just ideas, but actual recordings of those alternate paths. Quiet, detailed videos of timelines that never became ours. You could watch a version of your city where a river was never dammed, or a version of your country where a different language became the main one. In your own mind, history would start to feel less like a single rope and more like a thick braid, woven from many strands that did and did not happen. Take another long, gentle breath. Let your chest rise and fall. You might picture those alternate shelves of history glowing faintly behind a thin mist. We can sense their shapes, but we cannot quite read them. They are ideas from physics and philosophy, not things we can test in a lab today. Still, thinking about them teaches us something important. It shows us that even our real history, with no time machines, was full of almosts. Now we can turn toward memory itself. Even without time travel, our memories are not perfect copies of the past. Neuroscientists who study the brain have found that every time we remember something, we rebuild that memory. It is not like pulling a file out of a cabinet. It is more like telling ourselves a story again, using old pieces, but also new thoughts, feelings, and hints from the present. This means that memories can change over time. Details can shift. Colors can fade or brighten. Whole parts can be added or lost. In experiments, researchers have shown that if people are asked leading questions about an event they saw, they sometimes begin to remember things that did not happen. Not because they are lying, but because their brain is trying to make sense of the new suggestion and the old picture at the same time. Scientists have done hundreds of studies on this. In one famous experiment, researchers showed people a video of a car accident. Later, they asked some people how fast the cars were going when they contacted each other. They asked others how fast the cars were going when they smashed into each other. Just that one word, smashed, made people remember the cars moving faster. They also remembered seeing broken glass, even though there was no broken glass in the video. In another study, researchers showed people a list of words related to sleep: bed, pillow, dream, blanket, and so on, but they did not include the word sleep itself. Later, when asked to remember the list, many people said they saw the word sleep. Their brain had filled in the missing piece because it seemed to fit. These experiments show that memory is not like a video camera. It is more like a storyteller who keeps retelling the same story, but each time they tell it, they add a little detail or change a small part. The core might stay the same, but the edges shift. Over years, those small shifts can add up to big changes. Now imagine what would happen if the past itself changed. If a time traveler went back and moved a single stone, or whispered one sentence, or left one object behind, everyone's memory of that moment would need to adjust. But how? Would people remember both versions, the old and the new? Would they only remember the new one, with a faint feeling that something was different? Would some people remember nothing changing at all? If time travel were real, and people kept changing the past, our memories would have to cope with something much stranger. Imagine going to bed with one set of memories of your history class and waking up with a slightly different one because someone changed a detail 100 years ago. Maybe last night you remembered that a famous scientist discovered a certain medicine in 1928. The next morning, you remember that the discovery happened in 1931 instead. At first, you might think you misremembered, but then you open your textbook and see that it also says 1931 now. The digital record online matches. Old scanned newspapers match. Your teacher remembers teaching it that way for years. Everything agrees with the new version. Only a faint echo in your own mind whispers, "It used to be 1928." You are not sure. It feels like when you wake from a dream and are not sure which parts really happened. If time travelers could change big events, this kind of quiet shift might happen more often. People might feel a strange sense of drift, like the floor beneath their memories was slowly moving. To keep track of which version of history was which, we would need some kind of anchor that could not be changed, even if time itself was edited. Here, physics and imagination meet again. Some scientists talk about information being stored in deep ways in the universe, such as in the patterns of cosmic background radiation, or in the entanglement of particles. We do not know if any of that could protect history from a time traveler, but it is interesting to think about. You can imagine a kind of cosmic memory, a record written not in books or brains, but in the structure of space-time itself. Now, imagine that a group of future scientists wanted to protect history. They know that time travel is possible. They know that people are tempted to change things. So they build a device that sits outside the normal flow of time, gently watching the story as it plays out. Every time something changes, the device notices, the way a very careful historian notices when an old document has new ink on it. If people in that future world could compare notes with such a device, they might see many layers of history at once. They might see that in one version, a city burned. In another, it did not. In one version, a language survived. In another, it faded early. Their own memories would belong to just one branch, but their research would show them the outlines of the others. For them, history would feel less like a straight road and more like a set of overlapping paths, some bright, some dim. Take another gentle breath. Notice how these ideas stack softly, one on top of another. We began with a quiet library and a hidden hallway. We walked through old streets. We watched archaeologists brush dust from stone. We let our minds split history into branches and then gather it back again. Now, let us listen to one more kind of change. Not in the events, not in the evidence, and not in our memories, but in who gets remembered. In real life, this is already a major part of how history changes. For a long time, many books focused on kings, generals, and big wars. Over the last century, more and more historians have asked about people who were left out. Children, workers, women, enslaved people, scientists from outside Europe, and many others. When new letters are found, or when oral histories from families are recorded and archived, whole groups of people move from the edges of the story to the center. This has nothing to do with time travel, and everything to do with where we point our attention. As we change what we look for, we change what we remember, even though the past itself is the same. Now picture a future historian who has a time machine, but they choose not to change any events. Instead, they use it like a very powerful camera. They travel to times and places where ordinary people lived and worked. They sit quietly in the corner of a clay house, listening to a mother tell a story to her child. They stand near the back of a sailing ship and watch a young sailor learn the stars. They visit a village doctor in a small clinic and watch how they care for a patient. When this historian returns, they share what they saw. Not just numbers of ships and dates of battles, but the sound of a lullaby in a language that has been lost. The way people in that time shared food, the expressions on faces during a simple harvest. They might also record voices that never reached the original record, like the thoughts of someone who could not read or write, but still had a rich inner life. Over time, this would change which parts of history feel close to us. The famous names would still be there, but the invisible lives around them would become clearer. Just as new archaeological digs can reveal forgotten cities, careful time travel, used only for observation, could reveal forgotten feelings. Take another breath and let it out slowly. You can think of your own life for a moment. If someone from the far future visited your day, what would they remember that your school records or photos do not show? Maybe the way your classroom sounded, the way your family talks at dinner, the way you feel when you walk past a certain tree or building. All of those things are real, but they are not always written down. Time travel, in this gentle, careful form, would not change the past. It would change the richness of the story we tell about it. Scientists, including anthropologists and sociologists today, already try to do this by spending time with the communities they study, listening, watching, and taking notes over many months or years. They call this field work. In a way, time travel would be field work, not just across space, but across centuries. Now, quietly, we can return to the library. The silver hallway behind the wall fades. The hidden door closes. The shelves of history stand still. But something in you understands now that those shelves are not as simple as they look. They hold evidence that can change, memories that can shift, and stories that can be told in many ways. You can walk slowly along the aisle, running your fingers lightly along the spines of the books. Here is a thick volume filled with ancient cities that rose and fell before writing. Here is a thinner book, but filled with dense notes about a single year when a scientist made a discovery that saved millions of lives. Here is a book about your own lifetime, its pages still being written in soft ink. If time travel ever became real, these books might change in front of your eyes. Dates might move, names might shift, entire chapters might appear or disappear. But even now in our world, the books change in a quieter way. New evidence adds pages. New voices add chapters. New tools let us read old text in fresh ways. Historians sometimes say that every generation rewrites history, not because the past itself changes, but because we learn new things about it and ask new questions. So in the end, perhaps the biggest way time travel would change how we remember history is by making us even more aware that history is not a frozen thing. It is a living study, always being checked, tested, and filled in. Whether we use shovels in the desert, Satellites in space, microscopes in a lab, or imaginary doors in a library. We are always moving between what really happened and how we tell the story. Take a very slow breath in, counting softly in your mind if you like. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold it just for a moment, then let it out. 2, 3, 4. Feel how your body settles a little more with each breath. If your eyes are not closed yet, you can let them close gently now. You are living in one of those books on the shelf. Tonight, your page shows someone lying down, listening to quiet science stories, letting big questions drift by like clouds. You do not need to solve the puzzle of time travel. You do not need to remember every detail about history. Your brain will keep what it likes and let the rest float away. As you drift toward sleep, the library lights dim. The shelves fade. The silver hallway is still there, but you do not need to walk it. Time will carry you forward in the simple way it always has, one second after another. The past will stay where it is, full of mysteries that scientists, historians, and curious kids like you can keep exploring. You are part of that story, made of atoms from ancient stars, living in a world shaped by countless lives before yours. Somewhere, far away, galaxies are turning. Nearer by, our Earth is spinning quietly. And inside that spinning world, you are resting, breathing, and slowly falling asleep. If you happen to still be awake, you can let your thoughts grow softer, like pages closing one by one. And when you are ready, you can drift all the way down into sleep, knowing that the story of time and of history will still be here when you wake. Somewhere further down the shelves of that quiet library, there is another row of books waiting for us. If you feel your mind is still gently awake, we can walk a little farther together. Our steps are slow and quiet on the floor. The air smells of old paper, wood, and a hint of rain coming in through a cracked window. You stop beside a book with a cover that shows a stone circle under a cloudy sky. Inside are stories about the very early builders of monuments, the people who shaped stone and earth long before anyone wrote dates in a neat line. Archaeologists study places like this in our real world. They measure the way stones line up with the sunrise. They use tools to test how old the wood or bones nearby are. They ask, who built this and why? In recent decades, archaeologists in places like Turkey uncovered a site called Göbekli Tepe. It has tall carved stone pillars that seem older than cities and farms. Before that discovery, many experts thought that people needed large settled towns before they could build such complex monuments. The new evidence suggested the order might be softer, that people may have gathered to build and worship even while they still moved and hunted. The story of early human history changed because of new stones in the ground. The stones at Göbekli Tepe are huge. Some weigh more than 10 tons. They are carved with animals, symbols, and patterns that no one today fully understands. Using methods like carbon dating on bits of charcoal and bone found nearby, researchers figured out that people were working on this site more than 11,000 years ago. That is older than the pyramids in Egypt, older than Stonehenge in England, older than almost any other monument we know about. What makes this even more interesting is what researchers did not find. They did not find evidence of permanent houses nearby. They did not find fields of crops. They did not find the kind of settled village that experts thought was needed to organize such big building projects. This made archaeologists rethink their ideas about how complex societies began. Some experts now think that maybe people came together first to build and worship, and only later learned to farm and settle down. Others think that farming and monument building happened at the same time in different places and then spread. The truth is probably more tangled than either simple story. But the discovery of Göbekli Tepe opened up new questions and new ways of thinking. If a time traveler visited that site while it was being built, they would see something amazing. Hundreds or thousands of people working together, moving massive stones, carving intricate designs, all without the tools we think of as necessary for such work. They would see a society that was complex in ways we are still trying to understand. And if that traveler left behind even one small modern object, it would create a puzzle that might never be solved. Now imagine that in the middle of that site, hidden deep, someone from the far future had placed a tiny metal bead made from a pattern of elements that does not match the time. If time travel existed and a visitor had done that, the bead would puzzle every researcher who found it. Their dating tools would say the stone is more than 10,000 years old, but the design of the bead would look like it came from a laboratory centuries ahead of us. Real archaeologists love puzzles like this, but they also love patterns. When something seems impossible, they test again. They check if the object was moved, if it fell in later, if a burrowing animal carried it down. If again and again it appears to be from the wrong time, the story they tell has to bend. The book on the shelf changes its chapter titles. Instead of "Early farmers built the first monuments," it might say "Early gatherings built monuments, and farming came later." You can see how even one new find, one new layer, can gently tilt our memory of the past. Time travel would not be needed to do this. Careful work already does it. But if time travel were real, tiny objects from the wrong time could speed this tilting, like small weights placed on one side of a scale. Archaeologists have found other sites that challenge old ideas. In Peru, researchers discovered a city called Caral that is more than 5,000 years old. It has pyramids, plazas, and complex buildings, but no signs of warfare or weapons. This made historians rethink their ideas about how complex societies begin. Many experts had assumed that cities and states required conflict and conquest. But Caral suggests that cooperation and trade might have been enough. In India, archaeologists found the remains of an ancient city called Mohenjo-Daro. It was carefully planned with straight streets, drainage systems, and public buildings. But unlike many ancient cities, there are no grand palaces or temples. The layout suggests that the people who built it valued order and shared spaces more than individual power. This changed how historians think about early urban life. Each of these discoveries adds another layer to our understanding. They show that the past was more varied, more creative, and more surprising than we sometimes imagine. If time travelers visited these places while they were being built, they would see societies that organize themselves in ways we are still learning to understand. But even without time travel, archaeologists keep finding new sites, new artifacts, new clues. Every year, the story of human history gets a little longer, a little more complex, a little more interesting. The past keeps surprising us, not because it changes, but because we keep getting better at reading it. We walk on, and your hand reaches out to another book. This one has a ship on the cover, its sail full of wind, cutting through cold gray water. Inside are stories of explorers, traders, and quiet sailors who crossed seas long before airplanes. For a long time, people relied on old letters and maps to understand these journeys. But over the last years, scientists have also studied DNA from skeletons, bits of food in old pots, and the shape of worn teeth to track how people moved. By looking at ancient DNA taken from bones in graves across Europe, Asia, and the North Atlantic, researchers found clues that Viking-age sailors traveled and mixed with more distant communities than older books once said. They found traces of their DNA in places where written records were quiet. At the same time, traces of people from far lands were found in graves in the north. The story of those voyages grew richer and more tangled. One study looked at skeletons from a Viking burial site in Sweden. The researchers expected to find DNA that matched people from Scandinavia. Instead, they found a mix. Some people had DNA from places as far away as Persia, which is modern-day Iran. Others had traces from the British Isles, from Eastern Europe, and from parts of Asia. This told a story of a world that was more connected than old books suggested. Another team studied bones from Greenland, where Vikings tried to build settlements more than 1,000 years ago. They found that some of the people buried there had grown up in Iceland or Norway, but others had spent their childhoods in places much farther south. This suggested that the Viking world was not just about raiding and conquering. It was also about families moving, traders settling, and communities mixing. Historians used to rely mostly on written records, like sagas and chronicles, to understand these voyages. But those records often focused on famous leaders and big battles. They did not always mention the ordinary people who traveled, traded, and settled in new places. DNA evidence helps fill in those quiet stories. Now imagine if a time traveler had sailed with one of those Viking ships. They might have kept a journal, written in a language and style that did not match the time. If archaeologists found that journal centuries later, it would be a mystery. The dates and places might be correct, but the way it was written would seem wrong. Historians would have to decide whether to trust it or set it aside as a fake. Now add time travel as a soft thought experiment. Imagine a traveler from the future quietly boarding a wooden ship in the year 1000. They do not take over the journey. They just stand at the rail with the crew at night, looking at the stars. They bring with them a tiny notebook made of strange fiber that never rots. They record the exact path of the ship, using a clock that does not drift. Centuries later, historians in our time find that notebook preserved in a layer of peat or ice. Its writing does not match any known ink. Its pages do not match any known plant. But the pattern of stars drawn inside is perfect for the sky of that century. Its map lines up with what we know from other sources. It is a ghost document, half impossible, half correct. If scientists accepted it as real, It would sharpen our picture of those nights at sea. It would change how we remember navigation, risk, and skill. In our real world, we do not have notebooks from time travelers, but we do have new tools that feel almost as strange. Satellites in space can see tiny outlines of buried roads and house walls by how crops grow differently above them. Ground-penetrating radar can map a whole hidden city without moving a single stone. These methods have helped uncover long-lost Roman forts, Maya structures under jungle trees, and buried rivers that shaped where people settled. In Central America, researchers used a technology called LiDAR to scan through thick jungle trees. LiDAR sends out laser pulses and measures how long they take to bounce back. By doing this from an airplane, scientists can create a detailed map of the ground even when it is hidden under leaves and branches. What they found was amazing. Under the jungle, there were entire cities that no one knew existed. Roads, plazas, buildings, and farms spread across hundreds of square miles. Before this discovery, historians thought that Maya civilization was made up of separate city-states, each one mostly independent. The new maps showed that the cities were connected by a vast network of roads and canals. Some areas had far more people living in them than anyone guessed. The story of how the Maya organized their world had to be rewritten. In England, archaeologists used similar technology to find lost Roman roads and forts. Some of these had been buried under fields for more than 1,000 years. Farmers had been plowing right over them without knowing. The satellite images showed faint lines where the old roads ran and where walls and buildings once stood. Ground teams then went to those spots and confirmed what the maps suggested. These tools are like having a time machine that can look backward, but only at the shapes and structures that left marks in the earth. They cannot show us the people who walked those roads or hear the conversations in those buildings, but they can show us where to look, and they can reveal a past that is bigger and more complex than we imagined. If time travel were real, travelers might use similar tools to decide where to visit. They could scan through time to find the most interesting moments, the places where small changes might have big effects. They could map out the past like we map out the present, finding quiet corners and hidden stories that written records missed. Each time a hidden wall appears on the screen, a sentence in a history book somewhere gets a little longer. Where it once said, "This land was mostly empty," it might now say, "This land was full of farms and towns that left gentle traces." Our memory of the past grows denser and less flat. You take a breath and we move on. The library feels endless, but we are never lost. Another book waits, this time with a picture of a crowded market, colorful cloth hanging from stalls, voices drawn as little wavy lines in the air. Here, historians and economists study how people bought and sold goods centuries ago. They read ledgers, tax lists, and something called the Domesday Book, a huge survey of land and wealth made in England more than 900 years in the past. In modern studies, researchers use these records not just to learn who owned which field, but to understand how climate and harvests changed over time. They compare notes from tree rings, showing years of heavy rain or deep drought, with notes from scribes complaining about hunger or abundance. A bad harvest leaves a mark in both wood and ink. A string of good years leaves a different pattern. Tree rings are like nature's own history books. Each year, a tree adds a new ring. In good years, with plenty of rain and sun, the ring is wide. In bad years, with drought or cold, the ring is narrow. By studying very old trees or wood from ancient buildings, scientists can build a timeline of climate going back thousands of years. They can see when droughts lasted for decades, or when the weather was unusually warm or cold. In Europe, researchers have matched tree ring patterns with written records from medieval times. They found that years when tree rings showed drought often matched years when monks wrote about crop failures and hunger. Years with wide rings, meaning good growing conditions, often matched years when records talked about abundance and celebration. But sometimes the patterns do not match perfectly. A year might look good in the tree rings, but written records talk about hunger. Or a year might look bad in the rings, but records say things were fine. This tells historians that climate was not the only thing that mattered. Wars, trade, and the choices leaders made also shaped whether people had enough to eat. Now imagine a time traveler visiting a year when the tree rings show a coming drought. They could not change the weather, but they could share knowledge about storing grain or about crops that need less water. If enough farmers listened, the next few years might be easier, even though the weather stayed dry. When historians later studied that period, they might see unusual patterns: good survival rates during a drought, more grain stored than expected. They might wonder why, but they would not think to look for a visitor from the future. This is one way time travel could change history without leaving obvious traces. Small knowledge shared at the right moment could ripple outward, changing how communities coped with challenges. The big events, like wars and famines, might still happen, but the details, the hidden lives, the quiet choices could be different. Now we let time travel slip into the scene again, just as a story. Suppose someone from the future went back to that year of the survey and whispered advice into the ear of a single farmer. Plant this crop instead of that one. Store grain in jars and seal them this way. The farmer listens. The village survives a rough winter a little better than before. In the next century, a quiet tradition begins in that region of better storage, and fewer people starve in bad years. From the point of view of the whole world, this is a small change. No famous battle moves, no empire falls. But the memory of that place, if anyone could see it closely, would be warmer. More children would live to tell stories to their children. If historians later found records of unusual survival in that village compared to others, they might wonder why. They might look for differences in soil, trade, or laws. They would not think to look for a visitor from another time. This is one of the gentle questions time travel brings. If the changes are small and kind, and if they do not leave impossible objects behind, they might hide forever inside the noise of real life. Our memory of the big story stays almost the same, but the hidden lives inside it are different. Many experts today study these hidden lives. Social historians look for patterns of work and rest. Demographers look for patterns of birth and death. Climate historians look for the silent hand of weather behind events. Demographers study how populations change over time. They look at birth rates, death rates, and migration patterns. By studying these numbers, they can understand how societies grew or shrank, how people moved from place to place, and how diseases or famines affected communities. In one study, demographers looked at records from medieval Europe. They found that birth rates and death rates were both very high. Many children died young. Many adults died from diseases that we can now prevent or treat. The average lifespan was much shorter than it is today. But within that average, there was a lot of variation. Some people lived into their 70s or 80s even in those times. This research changed how historians think about life in the past. It was not just a time of constant suffering and early death. It was a time when life was more fragile, more uncertain, but still full of moments of joy and meaning. People found ways to celebrate, to love, to create, even in difficult conditions. Climate historians study how weather patterns affected human history. They look at tree rings, ice cores, and written records to understand when droughts or floods occurred. They compare these climate events with historical events, like wars, famines, or migrations. Some researchers have found connections between climate changes and major historical shifts. For example, a period of unusually cold weather in Europe in the 1300s might have contributed to crop failures and social unrest. A period of unusually warm weather in other places might have allowed populations to grow and civilizations to flourish. But climate historians are careful not to say that weather caused everything. They know that many factors work together. Climate might create conditions that make certain events more likely, but people still make choices. Societies still respond in different ways to the same challenges. If time travelers could observe these connections directly, if they could see how small changes in weather rippled through communities, they might understand history in ways that are impossible for us today. But even without time travel, climate historians keep learning more, adding another layer to our understanding of the past. We keep walking. Shelves slide past. Your steps grow slower, but your curiosity is still soft and awake. On another cover, you see masks and ink drawings of faces. These are books about memory itself, how our own minds remember. Neuroscientists use machines like MRI scanners to watch which parts of the brain glow when people recall a story. Cognitive psychologists give careful tests to see how easily people can be nudged to remember something that did not happen. In one famous kind of study, volunteers watch a short film of a small accident, perhaps two cars bumping into each other. Later, researchers ask questions. Some people are asked, how fast were the cars going when they hit? Others are asked, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? That one extra word, smashed, often makes people remember higher speeds, more broken glass, more damage, even if that was not in the film. From experiments like these, scientists learned that memory is not a recording. It is a story our brain rebuilds, using old pieces and fresh hints. If a single word can bend a memory, imagine what a true change in history could do. If time travel changed events, all the stories people told their children afterward would be different. The bedtime tales, the school lessons, the jokes and warnings, each one would ripple outward. Now picture a time traveler who is less gentle. They go back and change something big. Maybe they stop a famous war from starting, or they push a new invention to happen much earlier. In their own mind, they know what used to be true, but when they return to their original time, they find a world where no one else remembers the old version. Their friends, their family, their teachers, all recall a different set of facts. In some science fiction stories, this person is called a residual, someone who holds on to an old timeline. They walk through a museum and see paintings of events that no longer match their own memory. For them, history has two layers, like two drawings placed on top of each other. For everyone else, there is only one. In our real world, we sometimes see a tiny version of this when we look at old textbooks. A person who learned history 30 years ago might remember certain dates or maps that have changed in newer books. Borders shift. Country names change. Scientists make new discoveries about ancient peoples. If that person does not look at the new evidence, they keep the old picture in their mind. For them, the past feels different from the way it feels for a child learning today. For example, when the Soviet Union broke apart in the early 1990s, maps changed almost overnight. Countries that had been part of one large nation became independent. Borders shifted. New names appeared. A student who learned geography in the 1980s might remember a world map that looks very different from the one a student learns today. Similarly, when scientists discovered new evidence about human evolution, textbooks had to be updated. Old books might have said that humans evolved in a simple, straight line. New books show a more complex story with many branches and dead ends. A person who learned about evolution decades ago might remember a version that feels simpler and more certain than the version students learn now. These changes are not because the past itself changed. They are because we keep learning more about it. New discoveries add details. New tools reveal new evidence. New questions lead to new answers. The story keeps getting richer and more complete. But this can create a kind of memory mismatch. An older person might remember learning something one way, while a younger person learns it a different way. Neither is wrong exactly. They are just learning from different versions of our understanding, versions that reflect what we knew at different times. If time travel existed and changed the past itself, these mismatches would be even more dramatic. People might remember completely different versions of events, not because they learned from different books, but because the events themselves happened differently. The past would feel unstable, shifting, uncertain in ways that would be deeply unsettling. For now, we do not have to worry about that. The past stays where it is, but our understanding of it keeps evolving, growing, changing as we learn more. And that, in its own way, is a kind of time travel, a journey backward through evidence and imagination to understand what came before. This is not magic. It is just the slow turning of research and teaching. But it reminds us that even without time travel, there can be more than one memory of the same past inside different heads at the same moment. Historians try to bring these together by comparing sources and updating what we teach. You breathe in and out, steady as a quiet clock. If you like, you can imagine that each breath is a page turning. We move deeper now into stories where science and imagination touch. On one high shelf, dusty but glowing, is a book about light itself. Physicists have studied how light moves for centuries. They discovered that nothing with mass can move faster than the speed of light in a vacuum. They found that as you get close to that speed, time for you slows compared to people you left behind. This is called time dilation, and it is not just an idea. It has been tested with fast-moving airplanes, precise atomic clocks, and particles in accelerators. Tiny bits of matter called muons live longer when they move fast because time for them stretches. Astronauts on the International Space Station age very slightly less than people on Earth because they move quickly and sit a little higher in Earth's gravity well. The difference is tiny, but real. In one famous experiment, scientists put very precise atomic clocks on airplanes and flew them around the world. When the planes landed, the clocks on board were slightly behind the clocks that stayed on the ground. The difference was only a few billionths of a second, but it was measurable. Time really did move slower for the clocks that were moving fast. Muons are particles that are created high in Earth's atmosphere when cosmic rays hit atoms. These muons should decay or break apart very quickly. Most of them should disappear before they reach the ground. But scientists detect many muons at ground level. The reason is that from the muon's point of view, time is moving slower because the muon is moving so fast. What feels like a long journey to us feels like a shorter journey to the muon, so it has more time before it decays. This is not science fiction. This is real physics that has been tested over and over. Time really does stretch and bend depending on how fast you move and how strong the gravity is around you. We experience this effect every day, but it is so small that we never notice it. Now imagine what would happen if we could build ships that travel at speeds very close to the speed of light. For the people on board, time would move much more slowly. A journey that felt like a few years to them might take decades or centuries for the people they left behind. When they returned, they would step into a future that had moved on without them. Their personal history would be out of sync with the history of their world. So in a quiet, careful way, we already have travelers whose time is a bit out of sync with ours. Not by years, but by fractions of a second. If we ever found a way to build ships that could cruise safely at speeds close to light, crews might go on long voyages and return home to find that many more years passed for those who stayed behind. For the travelers, only a few years might have gone by. For the planet, decades or centuries could roll past. This kind of journey would not move anyone into the past, but it would move them into a different slice of the future compared to their friends. When they came home, their personal history would not match the shared history of their world. They might need whole new shelves added to the library to hold the stories of what they saw out there, while everyone else stayed here. If these travelers brought back clear records, our memory of the galaxy would change forever. They might see distant stars being born or catch a close view of a black hole. They could send us images of planets circling other suns with oceans and clouds. Their ships would be like time needles, stitching far corners of space into the fabric of our timeline. We step back from the physics shelf and return to the softer light of human stories. On another book spine, you see tiny drawings of clay tablets, bamboo strips, paper scrolls, and glowing screens. It is a book about how we store information, how we keep memories outside our bodies. Anthropologists and historians can look at these physical records to see how thinking changed. In ancient Mesopotamia, people pressed symbols into wet clay to track grain and trade. Later, in medieval Europe and Asia, scribes copied texts by hand, line by line, sometimes for years. The printing press allowed books to be made more quickly and cheaply. Today, digital files let a message cross the planet almost at once. Each of these shifts changed how fast ideas traveled and how solid they felt. A clay tablet survives if it is baked and buried, but it is heavy and slow to copy. A handwritten book can be lost to fire or water. A printed book is easier to replace if at least one copy survives. A digital file can be backed up in many places, but it can also vanish if no one cares to keep it or if formats change. Now picture a time traveler visiting the moment when a key tool, like the printing press, was about to be invented. They could wait until it appears on its own. Or they could whisper a design a little earlier, speed it up by a decade. If printing spread sooner, it might help certain ideas reach more people before a war, or before a sickness, or before a leader makes a choice. Historians in our real timeline already see how the printing press changed Europe's memory. Before printing, only a small number of people could read and own books. After printing, pamphlets and cheap texts spread new religious and political ideas very quickly. Some scholars say this helped fuel reformations and revolutions. It was not the only cause, but it greased the wheels. Before the printing press, books were copied by hand. This took a long time and cost a lot of money. A single Bible might take a scribe more than a year to copy. Only rich people or churches and monasteries could afford to own many books. Ideas moved slowly, and they could be controlled by those who controlled the scribes. After printing, books could be made much faster and cheaper. A printer could make hundreds of copies in the time it took a scribe to make one. Ideas that once took years to spread could now move across countries in months. New religious ideas, scientific discoveries, and political arguments reached far more people than before. Some historians point to specific moments when printing made a big difference. In the 1500s, a German monk named Martin Luther wrote arguments against certain church practices. Before printing, his ideas might have stayed in a small area. With printing, they spread across Europe in months, helping to start what became known as the Protestant Reformation. But here is something interesting. Printing was invented in China centuries before it appeared in Europe. Yet in China, it did not lead to the same kind of social changes. Historians debate why. Some think it was because Chinese society was organized differently. Others think it was because the Chinese government controlled printing more tightly. Still others think that other factors, like economics and politics, mattered more than the tool itself. This reminds us that tools do not change history by themselves. They change history when they meet the right conditions. When people use them in certain ways, and when other forces are already pushing in the same direction. A time traveler bringing printing to Europe a century earlier might find that it did not catch on, or that it was used in completely different ways than it was in our timeline. The same tool, in different hands and different times, can lead to different stories. This is one reason why historians are careful about saying that one invention caused one change. Usually, it is more complicated than that. Usually, many things work together, like threads in a braid. If printing had come even earlier, or in a different pattern, our stories about those centuries would be different. Perhaps certain voices would have been recorded that in our world were lost. Perhaps other voices would have been drowned out. Time travel, used here only as a thought, makes us notice how strongly tools of memory shape what we remember. We keep drifting. The library feels quieter now, as if many of its readers have gone to sleep. Yet our walk can continue as long as you like. Your breathing sets the pace. Your thoughts can float or land softly wherever they want. Another shelf, another book. This one holds stories about places where history has been erased on purpose. Sometimes, rulers in the past ordered old statues destroyed, names scratched from stone, records burned. Archaeologists have found temples where a king's face was chipped away, but the rest of the image left intact. In some ancient lists of kings, one name is missing, a blank where a whole life used to be. Historians call this damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory. It is an attempt to change how the future remembers the past, not by changing what really happened, but by changing the evidence that survives. Modern governments have also tried to rewrite history by controlling textbooks, banning some books, and promoting others. In ancient Rome, when an emperor was seen as a tyrant or a failure, the Senate could vote to erase their memory. Statues were torn down. Coins with their face were melted. Their name was removed from official lists. Inscriptions on buildings were chipped away. The goal was to make it as if that person had never existed, or at least had never been important. But these erasures were never complete. Archaeologists have found statues where a face was scratched out, but the outline still shows. They have found coins that were supposed to be destroyed, but were hidden away. They have found private letters that mention the condemned person. Even when rulers tried to erase someone from history, traces often survived. In more recent times, some governments have tried to control history by controlling what children learn in school. They write textbooks that emphasize certain events and leave out others. They ban books that tell different stories. They promote certain heroes and ignore others. The goal is the same as the ancient Romans, to shape how the future remembers the past. But just like in ancient times, these attempts are never fully successful. People keep diaries. Families pass down stories. Scholars in other countries write different versions. The internet makes it harder to control information completely. Even when governments try to erase history, some traces always remain. If time travel existed, someone might try to use it for the same purpose, to go back and prevent certain records from ever being created. But even then, traces might survive. A letter that was supposed to be burned might be hidden. A statue that was supposed to be destroyed might be buried. A story that was supposed to be forgotten might be passed down in secret. The past is stubborn. It does not disappear easily. In these cases, time travel is not needed to change the story. Choices in the present shape which pieces of the past remain visible. Yet even here, traces often survive. A scratched statue still leaves an outline. A burned library still leaves ashes that can be tested. A banned letter sometimes hides in a private box, waiting for someone to find it centuries later. If time travel existed, someone might try to use it in the same way, to erase a person or a group even more completely by going back to stop records from ever being made. That is a darker path, but thinking about it helps us see something. Our real world already has battles over memory that feel heavy and important. Which people are honored with holidays? Which events are taught in schools? Which stories get made into movies? When historians add new research about groups who were left out, it can sometimes feel to others as if the story is being attacked or changed. In fact, the deeper story is simply becoming more complete. Time travel stories, with their wild edits and branching worlds, remind us gently that adding more voices does not break the past. It makes it more real. In recent decades, historians have worked to include more voices in the story. They have studied the lives of women, children, workers, enslaved people, and many others who were often left out of older history books. This work has not erased the stories of kings and generals. It has added to them, showing that history is made up of many stories happening at the same time. For example, while textbooks once focused mainly on famous battles and political leaders, historians now also study how ordinary people lived during those same times. They ask what children were doing while wars were being fought. What were women doing while men were making laws? What were workers doing while leaders were making decisions? These questions add depth and richness to our understanding. Some people worry that adding these new stories means erasing the old ones, but that is not what historians are doing. They are expanding the story, making it bigger and more complete. The old stories are still there. They're just no longer the only stories. If time travelers could observe the past directly, they would see this complexity for themselves. They would see that history is not a single thread, but a vast web of interconnected lives and events. Every person, every choice, every moment matters in its own way. The story is too big and too rich to be told from just one point of view. This is why historians keep working, keep digging, keep asking new questions. There are always more stories to discover, more voices to hear, more layers to uncover. The past is not a finished book. It is a library that keeps growing, with new shelves and new volumes being added all the time. You might notice your body growing heavier now, as if gravity were wrapping you in a soft blanket. Your thoughts move more slowly, like pages turning in a gentle breeze instead of a gusty wind. Still, if a small part of your mind is awake, we can look at just a few more quiet questions before you drift away. On one of the last shelves, you see a book with a spiral galaxy on its cover. Inside are chapters about cosmic time, about how everything we have talked about, every human history, fits inside something larger. Astronomers know that the universe is about 13.8 billion years old, based on light from the cosmic microwave background and the way galaxies drift apart. Long before humans, before dinosaurs, before Earth even had continents, stars were living and dying. Each supernova sent out heavier elements that would one day form planets and people. In this sense, time itself has seen many chapters before ours. Yet our memories only reach as far back as our evidence and our imagination can go. Astronomers have learned to read the history of the universe by studying light that has been traveling for billions of years. When they look at very distant galaxies, they are seeing them as they were long ago because light takes time to reach us. The farther away something is, the older the image we see. By looking far enough, scientists can see galaxies as they were when the universe was young. The cosmic microwave background is like a photograph of the universe when it was only about 380,000 years old. Before that time, The universe was too hot and dense for light to travel freely. After that time, light could move, and some of that ancient light is still reaching us today. It is incredibly faint, but sensitive telescopes can detect it. This background radiation tells scientists about the early structure of the universe, about how matter began to clump together to form stars and galaxies. Particle physicists study even earlier times by recreating conditions that existed just after the Big Bang. They use huge machines called particle accelerators to smash particles together at nearly the speed of light. These collisions create tiny, brief moments of extreme energy, similar to what the universe was like in its first moments. By studying what happens in these collisions, scientists can learn about the laws of physics that governed the early universe. All of this work helps build a picture of cosmic history, a timeline that stretches back almost 14 billion years. But this history is different from human history. It is written in the language of physics, in the patterns of light and matter, in the structure of space and time itself. We cannot read it with our eyes or touch it with our hands. We need telescopes and particle accelerators and mathematics to understand it. If a time traveler could visit those early moments, if they could somehow survive the extreme conditions and bring back a record, our understanding of cosmic history would change in ways we can barely imagine. But even without time travel, scientists keep learning more. Each new telescope, each new experiment adds another piece to the puzzle. The story of the universe keeps getting richer and more detailed. If a time traveler could go back to the very early universe, to the first stars, and somehow bring back a clear record, our understanding of everything would change. Cosmologists and particle physicists use telescopes and equations to guess what happened then. A direct observation, even as a story, would fill whole new shelves. But those shelves would still sit beside the ones we have now, not replacing them, just expanding the library outward. The first stars formed when the universe was only a few 100 million years old. They were different from stars today. They were much larger, much hotter, and they lived much shorter lives. When they died, they exploded in supernovas that scattered heavy elements across space. Those elements eventually became part of new stars, planets, and eventually, life. Scientists cannot see these first stars directly because they are too far away and too faint. But they can see their effects. They can see the light from those early times stretched and shifted by the expansion of the universe. They can see the patterns of matter that those stars helped create. They can use math and physics to understand what those stars must have been like. If a time traveler could visit that era and bring back observations, scientists would learn things that are impossible to know from here. They would see exactly how those first stars formed. They would see what the early universe looked like up close. They would understand processes that we can only guess at today. But even without time travel, scientists keep learning more. New telescopes are being built that can see farther back in time. New detectors are being developed that can sense different kinds of signals. Each new tool adds another way to look at the early universe, another piece of the cosmic story. The history of the universe is written in light and matter, in the patterns of galaxies and the structure of space itself. We are learning to read that history slowly and carefully, using the tools we have. Time travel would make it easier, but it would not make it less amazing. The story is already incredible, even from where we sit. This is a soft, important thought. Even if time travel someday becomes real, even if people one day walk through that silver hallway for true, they will not erase what historians, archaeologists, linguists, and many others have already learned. They will simply add new layers, new senses, new angles. The careful work of reading pottery, soil, and ink will still matter. The long, quiet hours in archives will still count. So maybe the biggest answer to our question is this: time travel, if it ever arrives, would not just change history, it would also change historians. It would give them new tools, new puzzles, and new responsibilities. They would have to decide when to watch and when to leave the past alone. They would have to remember that every change creates new stories and closes off old ones. You stand now at the far end of the library. Behind you stretch rows of shelves filled with everything we have gently walked through tonight. Evidence that changes, memories that bend, branching timelines, real and imagined, hidden lives moving from the margins to the center, tools of writing and reading that shift our view, cosmic time holding all of it like a sky holds stars. In front of you is a simple wooden chair by a small window. Outside, night is deep and kind. You sit down and rest your hands in your lap. On the table beside you is a single blank page. If you wanted, you could start writing your own piece of history there. Not about empires or wars, but about a simple day in your life. The sound of your bus ride, the color of your favorite cup, the way you felt when you learned something new. Even if you never write it down, that day exists. It is real. It is part of the vast web of causes and effects that make up the world. Historians in the far future may never know your exact Thursday afternoon, but its echoes will ripple through the conversations you have, the choices you make, the kindness you show. Take one last, slow breath in. Let it fill your lungs gently. Then let it out, feeling your body sink just a little deeper into rest. Time around you moves at its familiar pace, 1 second after another. Somewhere clocks tick. Somewhere stars burn. Somewhere scientists compare notes about bones, books, light, and memory. But before we let everything fade completely, there is one more quiet thought we can visit. It is about the future. About the history that has not happened yet. If time travel could change how we remember the past, it could also change how we imagine the future. Right now, we can only guess about what will happen tomorrow, next year, or in 100 years. We make plans based on what we know. But we know that surprises will come. New discoveries will be made. New challenges will appear. The future is unwritten, full of possibilities. But what if time travelers from the future could visit us? What if they could tell us what will happen, or show us recordings of events that have not occurred yet? Would that change how we live? Would it change how we remember our own present moment, knowing how it all turns out? Some people might want to know the future so they could prepare, or so they could change it if they did not like what they saw. Others might not want to know, preferring the mystery and the freedom of not knowing what comes next. The question of whether we should know the future is as old as human curiosity itself. In our real world, we do not have time travelers from the future visiting us. But we do have something similar. We have scientists who study trends and patterns, who use math and data to make educated guesses about what might happen. Climate scientists model how the Earth's climate might change. Economists model how markets might behave. Demographers model how populations might grow or shrink. These predictions are not certain. They are based on what we know now, and they assume that current trends will continue. But trends can change. Surprises can happen. The future remains uncertain, no matter how carefully we study it. If time travel existed, and if travelers from the future could share what they know, that uncertainty might disappear. But would that be a good thing? Some philosophers argue that uncertainty is what makes life meaningful. That not knowing what comes next is what gives us freedom and purpose. Others argue that knowing the future would help us make better choices and avoid mistakes. We cannot test these ideas because we do not have time travel, but thinking about them helps us understand something important about history itself. The past is full of moments when people faced uncertain futures, when they made choices without knowing how things would turn out. Those choices shaped the history we remember today. If they had known the future, would they have chosen differently? We can never know, but we can wonder. And with that wonder, we can let everything drift away. The library fades, the shelves blur. The questions about time and memory and history all settle into a quiet hum, like background music that you notice but do not need to focus on. Your breathing slows, your thoughts grow softer. The whole vast story of the past, with all its mysteries and almosts and quiet details, can rest now, knowing that it will still be here when you wake. You are part of that story, a small but important piece in the endless flow of time. As you fall asleep, you can feel, if you want, that you are connected to everyone who came before you and everyone who will come after. Their stories are your story. Your story is part of theirs. And together, all of these stories make up the long, mysterious, beautiful thing we call history. The atoms in your body were forged in stars that died billions of years ago. The water you drink has been cycling through Earth's oceans, rivers, and atmosphere for millions of years. The air you breathe has been shared by countless living things before you. In a very real sense, you are made of history, built from pieces of the past. The ideas in your mind come from people who lived long before you were born. The words you speak evolved over thousands of years. The stories you know were passed down through generations. Even your way of thinking, your questions, your curiosity, all of these were shaped by the long conversation of human history. And just as you are made of history, you are also making it. Every choice you make, every conversation you have, every kindness you show, all of these ripple outward in ways you cannot fully see. They become part of the story that future historians will try to understand. Right now, as you drift towards sleep, you are living a moment that will one day be part of the past. Future historians might never know about this specific night, this specific moment of quiet listening, but the echoes of your life, the choices you make, the connections you form, all of these will continue, woven into the vast tapestry of human experience. So as you fall asleep, You can rest knowing that you are part of something much bigger than yourself. You are part of the endless story of time, of history, of life itself. And that story, with all its mysteries and wonders, will keep unfolding long after this night, long after you wake, long after everything we can imagine. The library of history is vast and growing. The shelves stretch on forever, and you, right now, are one of the stories being written, one of the pages being turned, one of the quiet moments that make up the whole. Rest well, little time traveler. The story continues, and you are part of it, always. You do not need to keep track of any of it right now. You can let the whole library dim, let the shelves blur, let the silver hallway close for tonight. The story of history, with all its twists, almosts, and quiet details, will keep unfolding without you having to hold it up. You are one small, bright card of that story, carried gently forward by time. As you fall asleep, you can feel, if you want, that you are resting in the middle of a universe that has been turning for billions of years and will keep turning long after this night. History will remember some things and forget others. But in this moment, what matters most is simple. You are here. You are breathing. You are allowed to rest. And as you drift down into deeper sleep, the shelves of the library close their eyes with you. The books wait. The pages are patient. When you wake, time will be waiting too, ready for another quiet day in the long, mysterious story we call history. But wait, there is one more quiet corner of the library we have not visited yet. If your mind is still gently floating, we can walk there together. The path is soft and winding. Your breathing can set the pace. This corner holds books about languages, about how words change and disappear. Linguists study how languages evolve over time. They compare old texts with new ones. They listen to how people speak in different places. They try to understand how a word that meant one thing 1,000 years ago came to mean something else today. Some languages have been lost completely. No one speaks them anymore. No one writes in them. The only traces are in old texts, or in place names, or in words that were borrowed into other languages. When a language dies, a whole way of seeing the world can fade with it. But sometimes, linguists can bring parts of a lost language back to life. By comparing related languages, by studying old inscriptions, by looking at how sounds change over time, they can reconstruct words and grammar that no one has spoken for centuries. It is like rebuilding a puzzle when most of the pieces are missing. You cannot get everything back, but you can get enough to see the shape of what was there. Now imagine a time traveler visiting a village where a language is about to be lost. Maybe the last few speakers are old, and the younger people have switched to a different language. The traveler could record conversations, stories, songs, and daily speech. They could bring back a complete record of a way of talking that would otherwise vanish. When linguists in the future studied those recordings, they would learn not just words and grammar, but how people used language to think, to joke, to describe their world. They would hear voices that history would have otherwise forgotten. The story of human communication would grow richer, more complete. In our real world, linguists race against time to record languages that are disappearing. Some estimate that by the end of this century, half of the world's languages might be gone. Each one that fades takes with it unique ways of understanding, unique stories, unique connections to the past. Time travel, used carefully, could help preserve some of what we are losing. But here's another thought. What if a time traveler changed which languages survived? What if they went back and helped one language spread more widely, or helped another language fade faster? A whole pattern of how humans communicate would shift. Books would be written in different languages. Ideas would flow along different paths. The way we remember the past would change because the words we use to describe it would be different. Language shapes thought in subtle ways. Some languages have many words for snow because snow is important in those cultures. Others have many words for different kinds of relationships because family structures are complex. If different languages had become dominant, we might think about the world in different ways, remember different details, tell different stories. You can feel your body sinking deeper now. Your thoughts are moving like slow clouds. But if a small part of you is still listening, we can visit one last shelf before you drift all the way to sleep. This shelf holds books about the very small, about atoms and molecules, about the building blocks of everything. Physicists and chemists study how matter behaves at the tiniest scales. They have learned that atoms are made of even smaller particles. They have learned that these particles can exist in strange states, connected across vast distances in ways that seem to break the rules of space and time. Some scientists wonder if information itself might be stored in these quantum connections, in the way particles remember their relationships with other particles. If that is true, then maybe the past leaves traces not just in books and bones, but in the very fabric of reality. Maybe time travel would not just change what we remember, but what the universe itself remembers. This is still mostly speculation, ideas that physicists play with using math and experiments, but it opens up wild possibilities. What if every choice, every event, every moment leaves a quantum fingerprint? What if time travelers could read those fingerprints, seeing not just what happened, but what almost happened, what might have happened if things had been slightly different? For now, these are just thoughts, gentle ideas to drift with as you fall asleep. The real work of understanding time, memory, and history continues in labs and libraries around the world. Scientists compare notes. Historians dig deeper. New tools reveal new layers of the past. You do not need to solve any of these puzzles tonight. You do not need to remember every detail. Your mind can let go of the big questions and just rest in the quiet wonder of it all. Time moves forward, as it always has. History keeps unfolding, as it always will. And you, right now, are part of that endless story, breathing softly in the dark. The library around you grows dimmer. The shelves fade into shadows. The silver hallway closes its door. All the books, all the stories, all the questions about time and memory, they will all still be here when you wake. But for now, you can let them go. You can let everything drift away until there is nothing left but your breathing, your heartbeat, and the gentle pull of sleep. Good night, little time traveler. May your dreams be peaceful, and may you wake to a new day full of quiet discoveries.